They thought she was hiding from fear, but in truth, she was waiting for courage. On the day the courtroom fell silent, a little girl sat curled beneath the judge's desk, too afraid to look up. The echoes of the trial rolled above her like distant thunder. She could smell the wood polish, hear the scratch of pens, and feel the tremor of her own heartbeat. Only one thing made her feel safe: the presence of a police dog sitting nearby. His name was Rex. He didn't look at her, but somehow, he knew. Every time her breath hitched, his tail brushed once against the floor, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. But as the trial reached its breaking point, something shifted. Rex's ears twitched. His body went rigid. Then came the sound, a deep growl, low enough to make the air itself feel heavy. Seconds later, the room would erupt in chaos. A weapon would be found, and that little girl's silence would finally make sense. This is the story of what happened next, of bravery born in fur and fear, and of the day a dog's loyalty turned danger into deliverance. The courtroom was unnervingly still, that kind of silence that feels heavier than sound. The air carried the faint buzz of old fluorescent lights, the shuffle of paper, and the low murmur of reporters who'd been waiting all morning for something to happen. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of nervous bodies. Outside, the storm that had threatened since dawn pressed against the courthouse windows, streaking them with gray. Inside, tension built like static before lightning. At the center of it all sat a massive oak desk, the judge's bench, carved and polished until it gleamed under the courtroom lights. Beneath it, hidden from every eye in the room, a small figure crouched low, her knees pressed against her chest. She was 9 years old. Her name was Lily. She didn't move, didn't speak. Only her fingers trembled as they clutched a torn strip of dark blue fabric, the corner of a service vest, frayed at the edges. Her breathing came shallow, soft enough to be lost beneath the scrape of a lawyer's chair. Every few seconds, she lifted her head just enough to see through the narrow crack of shadow that fell beneath the judge's robe. From that secret world beneath the desk, she could see people's shoes, polished black leather, clicking heels, the dull brown boots of officers standing guard. She saw movement without faces, voices without names, and though she could not see the man on trial, she felt him. Time 300 mo. The sound of his voice, low, impatient, familiar, sliced through the air like a blade. She knew that voice. The nightmares had never let her forget it. The prosecutor's voice was calm and methodical, but there was something brittle underneath. "The witness is a minor," he said, flipping through his notes. "Her statement has been verified by multiple accounts, including Officer Daniels and his partner, the K9 unit Rex." At that name, Lily's small hand twitched. She turned her head ever so slightly. Just a few feet away, sitting tall and silent beside the judge's chair, was Rex, a German shepherd with a coat the color of old gold and eyes that watched everything. He didn't blink often. He didn't fidget or pant. He just sat, perfectly still, as if carved from loyalty itself. When Rex shifted, the faint clink of his tag, Police K9 Unit 47, echoed softly. Lily's gaze found him through the slit of light beneath the judge's robe. For the first time that morning, her body relaxed, just a little. He was here, and as long as he was here, she was safe. Her memory pulled her backward, to the night she first saw Rex. The sirens, the flashing blue lights on wet pavement, the smell of gasoline and fear. The officers had kicked down the door. She had been hiding then too, behind a couch, clutching a broken toy. When the men stormed in, it wasn't the noise that made her cry. It was the sight of the dog. Calm, focused, unafraid. He walked toward her, slow and low, until his nose touched her hand. No words were needed. She followed him out into the light. Now, months later, she was hiding again. But this time, the dog was beside her once more, her silent promise of safety. Above her, the trial continued. The defense lawyer's pen clicked rhythmically, each sound sharp as a drop of rain hitting metal. Someone coughed. The stenographer's keys clattered like insect wings. These ordinary noises, so small, so human, filled the space, but underneath them ran a deeper pulse. Fear. Anticipation. A sense that everyone in the room was waiting for something, though no one could say what. Lily pressed her ear against her knees. She didn't want to hear his voice again, but she couldn't stop listening. "Your Honor," the man said, the one on trial, "these accusations are outrageous. I've been framed. That child," the judge's gavel struck once. "You will not refer to the witness directly," he warned. The echo rolled through the room like thunder. Lily flinched. Rex lifted his head slightly. A low rumble rose from his chest, too quiet for most to notice, but enough to make the deputy nearest him glance down. Daniels, his handler, placed a calm hand on the dog's shoulder. "Easy, boy," he whispered. But the shepherd didn't look away. His gaze stayed locked on the defense table, pupils narrowing as though reading a language only he could understand. From her hiding place, Lily saw his ears twitch. She knew that look. It wasn't anger. It was focus. He was listening to something she couldn't hear. Her heart began to race again. Minutes stretched like hours. Every tick of the clock overhead felt like a countdown to something unseen. The smell of coffee and cologne mixed with the dry scent of paper and varnish. Sunlight filtered weakly through high windows, casting pale rectangles on the courtroom floor. Lily's fingers tightened around the torn vest fabric. She whispered to herself, a soundless promise. "Please, just let it be over. Please, Rex. Stay with me." Then, a sudden sound. A sharp scrape, metal against wood. Subtle. Almost nothing. But Rex heard it first. His head snapped toward the judge's desk, ears fully erect. A quiet whine escaped his throat. The judge paused mid-sentence. "Something wrong, Officer Daniels?" Daniels shook his head, though his eyes were now on his partner. "He's alerting to something, Your Honor. Could be stress from the crowd." The defense attorney smirked, trying to regain control. "Perhaps the animal should be removed if he's distracting." Before he could finish, Rex gave a low, urgent growl, deeper this time, not angry, warning. Lily's heart froze. She had seen this before, the way he froze, the way his eyes hardened. He was sensing danger. The room didn't yet understand. Only she did. Under the desk, her breath came quicker. Her hand moved from the fabric to the cool wood above her head. Her fingers brushed something strange, a small metallic vibration. She frowned, leaned closer, and then she felt it. Cold, hard, magnetic. But before she could comprehend it, Rex's whimper filled the room, a desperate, trembling sound that sliced through every conversation. The courtroom went dead quiet. The judge blinked. "What's wrong with him?" he asked, his voice uneasy. Daniels stepped forward, following Rex's stare, straight toward the base of the desk, where Lily hid unseen. Lily's eyes widened. The metal she'd touched. It wasn't part of the desk. It was something attached there. Something she shouldn't have found. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Rex's growl deepened. The sound vibrated through the floor, through her chest, through the silence of everyone holding their breath. Something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. The courtroom's heavy air seemed to press inward after Rex's low growl faded. People shifted uneasily, whispering about the strange behavior of the police dog. The judge cleared his throat, the gavel's soft tap restoring order. But beneath the surface, a current of unease rippled, something no one could yet name. Rex sat motionless again, though his ears twitched every few seconds, tracking sounds only he could hear. From her hiding place under the desk, Lily kept her eyes fixed on him. He looked calm now, but she knew what that stillness meant. It was the kind of quiet that came before a storm. She had seen it once before, the night her life had changed forever. It was raining that night. Not a gentle rain, but a relentless downpour that swallowed the streetlights and turned every shadow into something alive. Sirens sliced through the darkness, blue and red lights flashing against the dripping windows of a small, crumbling house at the end of a dead street. Inside that house, a little girl crouched in a corner, her body shaking, her arms wrapped around her knees. The television blared somewhere in the next room, too loud, too harsh. She had learned to count the distance between the yelling and the silence. That's how she knew when to hide. She didn't know what time it was. The clock on the wall had stopped days ago, its second hand frozen between ticks. All she knew was that her throat hurt from not crying. Crying only made things worse. Then came the sound she didn't understand. Heavy boots pounding outside, a voice shouting commands, a crash, splintering wood, the door breaking open. The girl squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the blow that always came next. But instead of shouting, she heard something else. A bark. Deep, confident, certain. She opened her eyes. Through the gap between the couch and the floor, she saw paws, large, muddy, strong, moving slowly across the room. The dog's nose brushed the carpet, then lifted toward her. Another bark, gentler this time. She froze. The creature was huge to her. Fur glistening with rain, eyes sharp as amber fire. Yet there was something soft in that gaze, something that didn't belong to the world she knew. He didn't rush. He didn't scare her. He simply waited. An officer appeared behind him, tall, soaked to the bone, voice firm but kind. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. He won't hurt you." But she didn't trust voices anymore. Voices lied. The dog, though, he didn't lie. He stepped closer, lowering himself until his chest touched the floor. His ears flattened, tail still, body still. He didn't move until she did. Slowly, she reached out a trembling hand. Her fingers brushed his fur. Warm, coarse, alive. And for the first time in months, she let out a sound. Not words, not a cry. Just a breath. He nuzzled her palm. That was how Rex found her. From that night on, he became more than a dog. He was her anchor in a world that had collapsed around her. In the hospital, when doctors spoke softly, but she couldn't listen, Rex lay at the foot of her bed. At the shelter, when other kids cried and she couldn't sleep, Rex rested his head on her blanket until her shaking stopped. She didn't talk to anyone then. Not to the social workers. Not to the kind woman who brought her meals. But she whispered to Rex. Sometimes she just said his name. Sometimes she said nothing at all. Just rested her forehead against his and breathed. There was no need for words. Their silence was a language of its own. Back in the courtroom, that same silence lived between them again. The lawyers spoke in steady, practiced tones. The hum of machines and paper filled the air. But all Lily could hear was the slow rhythm of Rex's breathing. Every rise and fall of his chest reminded her of safety, of nights when she'd wake up screaming and he'd be there before the lights came on, of mornings when she'd hold his vest and feel brave enough to walk into another day. She wasn't here today because anyone made her come. She was here because Rex was here. Without him, she couldn't have walked through those doors. Without him, her voice, the one the world had tried to take, might never have returned. She shifted slightly, pressing her hand to the wooden floor, trying to feel the vibration of his steady stance. He hadn't moved for minutes. Even in the chaos earlier, when people gasped at his growl, he stayed poised, watching, listening, protecting. That was Rex, the silent guardian. At the front of the room, Officer Daniels, his handler, watched him closely. He'd worked with dozens of dogs in his career, search and rescue, narcotics, even explosives, but none like Rex. There was an intuition in this dog that went beyond training, something human in its precision. Daniels often joked that Rex didn't follow orders. He anticipated them. Today, though, Rex's energy was different. He wasn't restless. He was calculating. His tail remained still, but his eyes moved in sharp, deliberate motions, from the judge to the defendant, back to the judge again. Lily could see it too, from her little world under the desk. His gaze wasn't random. It was fixed. Every time the man at the defense table shifted, Rex's head followed, muscles tightening almost imperceptibly. The girl's heartbeat picked up again. She didn't know why, but something about Rex's posture scared her. Not because he looked angry, but because he knew. He always knew. Time, 100 she's. Above, the defense lawyer droned on about evidence and witnesses. The accused sat motionless, expression calm, fingers drumming faintly against the table. To the room, it looked like composure. To Rex, it looked like preparation. His ears twitched once, twice. Then they froze. He turned his head slightly. That subtle, deliberate movement Lily had learned meant danger, the kind that humans never saw coming. Her small fingers gripped the torn piece of his vest. She didn't understand what was wrong, but she felt it in her chest. The air tightening, the same way it had the night of the rescue. The judge adjusted his glasses, oblivious. "Proceed," he said. Rex didn't move, but every muscle under his coat was coiled, ready. From where she hid, Lily whispered under her breath, almost a prayer. "It's okay, boy. I'm here." Rex's ear flicked toward her voice. For a heartbeat, the tension softened. Then slowly, his gaze drifted back to the defense table. Something there made him still completely, a silence so deep it felt like the air itself held its breath. Lily didn't know what he saw. Neither did anyone else. But the look in his eyes changed, from watchful to certain. The dog's posture stiffened, tail straightening just slightly behind him. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Rate. Slow. The silent guardian had seen the shadow. long before the light would reveal it. The courtroom clock struck 11, its echo slicing through the murmured rhythm of voices and paper. The trial had dragged on for hours, but inside the oak-paneled room, time seemed to stand still. Faces were drawn tight with fatigue. The air smelled faintly of old books, damp wool, and the bitter sting of coffee cooling in forgotten cups. Judge Hamilton cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice steady but weary. "We will proceed with the examination of evidence." That's when it happened. A low, rolling growl rippled through the room, soft at first, like distant thunder. For a moment, people didn't react. The sound was too subtle, too foreign to fit the courtroom's order. But then it came again, deeper, sharper, unmistakably from the German shepherd sitting beside the judge's bench. Rex. The dog's lips barely parted, but the sound vibrated through the floor, through the silence, through every chest in the room. It wasn't a bark, not even aggression. It was a warning, ancient, primal, instinctive. Heads turned. The bailiff frowned. Someone in the back whispered, "Is he okay?" A reporter lowered her pen, eyes wide. Cameras clicked once, twice, the sudden chaos of curiosity. "Time 800 ml." The judge paused, puzzled, looking down at the animal. "Officer Daniels, control your dog, please." Daniels, standing off to the side, stepped forward quickly. "Sir, he's not acting aggressive," he said carefully. "Something's setting him off." The defense attorney gave a dry laugh. "Your Honor, perhaps this animal feels the tension in the room. Shall we take a short recess?" But Rex wasn't responding to voices. He wasn't responding to anything human. His eyes, sharp, amber, unblinking, were fixed beneath the judge's desk. His nostrils flared, tail stiff, body leaning slightly forward. His chest rose and fell faster now, and another low sound rolled from his throat. Under the desk, Lily froze. She felt the vibration before she heard it, the faint rumble traveling through the wood above her head. Then she saw his paws shift, claws scraping softly against the polished floor. Her breath caught. Something was wrong. She reached out without thinking, her small hand trembling as she stretched toward him. Her fingers brushed the coarse fur of his paw. "Shh," she whispered, too quiet for anyone to hear. "It's okay, boy. I'm here." Rex's growl softened into a whimper, but it didn't stop. His gaze stayed locked on the dark space just inches from her head, the underside of the desk. Lily frowned. There was nothing there. "Time hurt mums." Just the smooth curve of wood and the shadowed corners. But she could feel the tension in him, the way his muscles quivered beneath his skin. She remembered that look. She had seen it once before, the night of her rescue, when Rex had stopped in front of a locked door moments before the police broke it open. He had known, even then, what waited on the other side. Now, that same look had returned. "Officer Daniels," the judge said again, uneasy. "Is this typical behavior?" Daniels hesitated, brow furrowing. "Not without reason, sir." He stepped closer, kneeling slightly beside Rex. "Easy, partner," he murmured, hand hovering above the dog's neck. But Rex didn't blink, didn't shift his stare. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every sound, every breath, seemed to fade beneath the weight of that growl. Then, slowly, the whimper changed. It grew sharper, almost desperate. Rex lowered his body to the ground, nose pointing directly toward the underside of the bench, where Lily hid unseen. "Your Honor," Daniel said softly. "I think he's—" The judge bent forward to look. His robe rustled. His glasses slipped down the bridge of his nose as he peered under the heavy oak structure. "What in the—" He froze. For a moment, no one breathed. The room seemed to tilt, the hum of the lights fading into nothing. From his angle, the judge could just make out something glinting in the shadow, a sliver of steel, dull with dust, but unmistakable. A knife, fixed to the underside of his desk. The blade had been secured with a strip of magnetic tape, positioned directly below where he sat every day, just within reach of the defense table across from him. The color drained from his face. "Officer Daniels," he said quietly, "get over here. Now." The courtroom rustled with confusion. "What is it?" someone whispered. "What's happening?" Cameras shifted, but no one dared speak too loudly. Daniels crouched beside the judge, his eyes widening as soon as he saw the glint of metal. "Jesus," he muttered. "Sir, everyone needs to step back." Rex rose in one fluid motion, positioning himself between the desk and the defendant's table. The low rumble from his chest turned to a sharp, guttural bark, one that shattered the fragile calm of the room. People gasped. Reporters stumbled backward. The defense attorney's papers fluttered to the floor. "Officer, what is this about?" the judge demanded, his voice trembling despite himself. Daniels kept his voice level. "It's a concealed weapon, Your Honor. Looks like it's been here a while, magnetized under the desk." He turned his head toward Rex, who was still staring, rigid, muscles taut as a wire. The dog wasn't just reacting to the sight. He had smelled it. The faint trace of metal, oil, something foreign beneath the familiar scent of wood and varnish. The realization hit everyone at once. If Rex hadn't warned them, no one would have noticed until it was too late. From her hiding place, Lily's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand the full meaning of what they'd found, but she could see the relief and fear spreading across the faces above her. Rex's growl faded again, replaced by heavy breathing. His eyes flicked briefly toward her, and in that split second, their gaze met through the shadowed light. She mouthed the words, "Good boy." But before the room could settle, the atmosphere shifted again. The accused man, the one seated across from the judge, had gone completely still. His hands, which had been resting on the table moments ago, were now gripping the edge tightly. His jaw flexed. His eyes, cold and calculating, darted toward the weapon now exposed. Rex noticed first. His body stiffened. One paw edged forward, claws clicking faintly on the tile. Lily's stomach clenched. She saw the change, too, the danger reflected in her guardian's eyes. Daniels followed the dog's gaze, his instincts kicking in. "Your Honor," he started, but the words were cut short as the defendant suddenly rose to his feet, knocking his chair backward with a screech that made everyone jump. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge tried to stand. The bailiff reached for his weapon, and Rex, ever the silent guardian, was already in motion. For a moment, time stopped. The courtroom, once filled with routine sounds of testimony and paper, fell into an eerie stillness that pressed against every chest like a held breath. The judge stared at the glint of metal beneath his desk, disbelief washing over his face. It wasn't supposed to be there. It couldn't be. Yet the proof shimmered before him. A long, thin dagger, its steel dulled with dust, magnetically attached just below the wooden surface where he had sat for years. A gasp broke the silence, then another. Reporters lifted cameras instinctively, the rapid shutter clicks colliding with startled whispers. Someone in the back muttered a prayer. The defense attorney stumbled backward, his papers scattering across the floor. What is that? Rex moved first. The German shepherd's body went rigid, ears up, tail straight as a line. His growl deepened, resonating through the courtroom floor like distant thunder rolling through the earth. The chain of his badge tag rattled softly as he shifted his weight forward. Every eye turned toward him, but his focus was elsewhere, locked on the man at the defense table. The accused, a tall, broad-shouldered man in a pressed gray suit, had gone pale. His expression twisted, muscles tightening at his jaw. For a fraction of a second, his mask of composure cracked, and something cold flashed in his eyes. Level, strong. Calculation. He knew. His plan was exposed, and in that instant, something inside him snapped. Before anyone could react, he lunged. The scrape of his chair, the crash of metal against tile. It all happened at once. He shot forward like a coiled spring released, his hand reaching toward the desk, toward the judge who was still frozen in shock. "He's got a weapon!" someone shouted. But Rex was already moving. The shepherd exploded into motion, a blur of fur, muscle, and instinct. His claws tore against the polished floor as he launched himself across the courtroom. The sound of his bark, sharp, guttural, commanding, cut through the chaos like a gunshot. The man barely made it 2 steps. Rex hit him mid-lunge, slamming his weight square into the man's chest. The impact echoed off the walls, a violent, raw collision of flesh and fury. The man stumbled, crashing backward, his arm flailing for balance. The knife, the very weapon hidden beneath the desk, clattered to the floor as his hand grazed it. Rex's jaws clamped around his forearm before he could grab it. A roar of pain tore from the man's throat. The dog's growl deepened, primal, protective, the sound of centuries of loyalty condensed into one perfect, decisive act. "Rex, hold!" Daniel shouted, sprinting from his post. But the command was half instinct, half respect. He knew his partner didn't need direction now. The courtroom erupted into chaos. People screamed. Reporters ducked under benches, cameras clattering to the floor. The bailiff drew his weapon, shouting for everyone to stay back. The judge stumbled away from the bench, his gavel rolling off the table, striking the floor with a hollow clack. Lily, still hidden beneath the desk, covered her ears. Her small body trembled, tears spilling freely now. But through the noise, she heard one sound that didn't frighten her. The rhythmic growl of Rex as he held the attacker down. It was the same sound she'd heard the night he saved her. The sound of safety. Daniels reached them in seconds, sliding to his knees beside the struggling pair. "Rex, release," he commanded, firm but calm. Rex hesitated, just long enough to make sure the man was subdued, then obeyed. His jaws released, but his stance remained dominant, front paws pressing into the man's chest, his body shielding the judge behind him. 2 officers rushed in from the doorway, wrestling the man's arms behind his back. The knife was kicked away, sliding under a bench. "Suspect detained," one of them shouted. Rex stepped back slightly, still watching. His sides heaved with heavy breaths, but his eyes, those sharp, burning eyes, never left the man's face. The accused glared up at him, hatred and fear twisting together. "Stupid dog," he spat, his voice raw. "You ruined everything." Rex's ears flattened. He didn't bark, didn't growl. only stared, unblinking. That silent defiance was more powerful than any roar. The bailiff grabbed the man by the collar and hauled him to his feet. "You're done," he said coldly. "You'll be lucky to see daylight again." As the officers dragged the man out, the room erupted into a chorus of overlapping voices. Reporters shouted questions. People clapped. Some cried. Others simply sat frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Judge Hamilton slumped back into his chair, visibly shaken. He wiped his forehead, his hand trembling slightly. "Officer Daniels," he said softly, "if your partner hadn't been here." His voice trailed off. Daniels nodded once, his throat tightening. "He always knows, sir. Always." Rex stood beside him, chest rising and falling. His fur bristled along his spine, but his eyes softened as he turned toward the desk, toward the little girl still crouched beneath it. Lily's heart pounded as she peeked out. She saw the officers leading the man away, the knife sealed in evidence bags, the cameras flashing again. But all she cared about was the figure standing in the center of it all. Rex, tail lowered, panting quietly, his gaze searching for her. When their eyes met, something inside her broke. The tension, the fear, all the bottled silence that had lived in her for months. She crawled out from beneath the desk, ignoring the gasps around her, and ran straight to him. Time to 400 moms. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her small face burying into his fur. "Good boy," she sobbed. "Good boy." The courtroom fell silent again. Not from fear this time, but reverence. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. The sight of that little girl clinging to the police dog, who had just saved them all, was more powerful than any headline. Daniels placed a hand on Rex's back, his voice low, steady. "You did good, partner. You did real good." The judge stood, clearing his throat. His voice wavered but carried weight. "Let the record show," he said, "that today justice was not only served, it was protected by loyalty, courage, and instinct no human could match." He looked down at Rex, emotion softening his stern features. "This court owes you its life." Rex didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He closed his eyes briefly, leaning into Lily's touch, his breathing slowing as the storm inside him quieted. The echoes of chaos faded, replaced by the faint sound of rain tapping against the courthouse windows. Outside, sirens wailed. Inside, a single truth settled in the hearts of everyone present. Sometimes, heroes don't wear badges or robes. Sometimes they walk on four paws, silent, steadfast, and unafraid of the dark. The chaos had ended, but the silence that followed was even louder. The courtroom, once filled with shouts, commands, and the sharp click of cameras, now stood frozen, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Papers littered the floor. The overturned chair near the defense table lay on its side, one wheel spinning slowly before coming to a stop. Only one sound broke the stillness, the heavy, labored rhythm of Rex's breathing. He stood in the center of it all, chest rising and falling, his coat streaked with sweat and dust, a faint trace of blood where his teeth had grazed the attacker's arm. His tail hung low, not from fear, but exhaustion, the kind that comes when every ounce of strength has been spent in service to something greater than yourself. And then, from beneath the judge's bench, a soft sound emerged. The creak of movement, the small shuffle of knees against wood. Lily. She crawled out slowly, her hands trembling, eyes red and wide. For a moment, she hesitated, her gaze darting between the adults, the officers, the judge, the reporters frozen in disbelief. But none of them mattered. Her eyes found him. Rex. He turned at the sound of her movement. The instant their gazes met, his ears lifted. His body, still tense from the fight, softened. His tail gave one slow, uncertain wag, as if asking permission. That was all it took. Time 500. Lily ran. Her small shoes slapped against the marble floor, echoing like a heartbeat through the stillness. No one moved to stop her. Every soul in that courtroom, hardened officers, weary lawyers, even the judge, simply watched as she threw her arms around the great dog's neck and buried her face in his fur. "Good boy," she whispered between sobs. "Good boy, Rex. You did it." Her tears fell freely, tracing down her cheeks and soaking into his coat. Her small hands clung to him, desperate, as though letting go might bring the danger back. Rex didn't move. He didn't need to. His body spoke for him. A steady warmth, a silent assurance that she was safe. His breathing slowed, each exhale brushing against her shoulder like a wordless lullaby. A single tear slipped down the judge's face. He removed his glasses, wiping them with a trembling hand, then simply let them fall to his desk. His voice was soft when he finally spoke, meant more for himself than anyone else. "Look at that. Would you?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The officers who had subdued the attacker stood still now, their hands loose at their sides. Even the bailiff, a man known for his discipline, bowed his head slightly, as though in reverence. The courtroom, a place built for rules, for evidence and arguments, became something else entirely. A sanctuary of quiet gratitude. A cameraman in the back lowered his lens, tears glinting in his own eyes. "I can't," he whispered, shaking his head. "I can't even film that." It wasn't a story anymore. It was a moment. Raw, sacred, untouchable. Rex's body trembled slightly, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the ache of exertion. Lily felt it, the subtle shudder beneath her hands. She pulled back just enough to look at him. "You're hurt," she said softly, her lip quivering. Daniels knelt beside them, running his hand over Rex's side with practiced gentleness. "He'll be fine," he said, though his voice was thick with emotion. "Just a few scratches. He's tougher than all of us." Rex's tongue flicked out once, brushing Lily's cheek. The gesture was small, but it broke what remained of her composure. She started crying again, harder this time, not from fear, but release. Months of silence, of bottled pain and unspoken memories poured out of her all at once. Every nightmare, every whispered, "Stay quiet," every moment she'd hidden, they melted into that single embrace. And Rex, the dog who never spoke a word, carried it all for her. Judge Hamilton rose slowly from his chair, his robe swaying as he stepped down from the bench. The crowd parted instinctively, clearing a path. He stopped a few feet from the girl and the dog, his eyes soft with awe. "I've presided over hundreds of cases," he said quietly, voice trembling. "But I've never seen anything like this." Daniels looked up, his hand still on Rex's collar. "He just did what he's trained to do, sir." The judge shook his head. "No," he murmured. "This wasn't training. This was something else." He crouched slightly, his knees creaking with age, until he was at Lily's level. She looked, Up, her face streaked with tears. "You're safe now," he said gently, "because of him, and because of you, for being brave enough to be here." Lily nodded faintly, then turned her gaze back to Rex. Her fingers tightened in his fur. "He's my hero," she said, voice cracking but certain. "He always finds me." The judge's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then I think you found each other." The air in the courtroom began to shift, a slow thaw after the storm. People exhaled, some crying quietly, others simply watching in stunned silence. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time that day, spilling across the tall courthouse windows. It touched the floor, climbing slowly until it reached Rex and Lily, bathing them in a warm, golden glow. It looked almost divine. The girl's tear-streaked face against the noble profile of the German shepherd who had just saved them all. The light made his fur shine like bronze, highlighting the scars, the sweat, the raw beauty of a creature that gave everything without expecting anything in return. Daniels leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "You've done your duty, partner. You can rest now." Rex blinked slowly, as if understanding. He lowered his head into Lily's arms and closed his eyes. His breath came steady and deep, each exhale slower than the last, like a soldier finally standing down after battle. Lily didn't let go. Her small fingers traced the letters on his vest. Police K9 Unit 47. She smiled through her tears. "You're still my Rex," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but there was peace in it now. The fragile peace that comes when the worst is finally over. Around them, life slowly resumed. Officers guided witnesses out of the room. Reporters spoke in hushed tones. The hum of the city returned beyond the walls. But for that moment, that suspended golden heartbeat in time, nothing else existed but a little girl and her dog, holding each other in a silence more powerful than any verdict. It was not the kind of justice written in law books. It was the kind that lived in the space between fear and love, between darkness and light, the kind only the truest hearts could deliver. And as the sun climbed higher, painting them both in warmth, it was clear to everyone watching. Heroes aren't born in the spotlight. They're born in the quiet, in the moments when someone needs saving most. And sometimes, the savior comes on four legs, with eyes that see what no human ever could. The golden light that had filled the courtroom began to fade, replaced by a softer, gentler glow. The storm outside had passed, but in Lily's eyes, another kind of storm was still settling. She stayed close to Rex, her small hands never leaving his fur. The judge watched quietly, his heart heavy with unspoken thoughts. Daniels stood beside the dog, exchanging hushed words with the officers. Around them, the room slowly emptied, footsteps echoing down the marble hall. But for Lily, the world had narrowed to one heartbeat, Rex's. His breathing was slow now, steady and warm against her cheek. She closed her eyes and let herself drift, her mind pulling her back to a time before the courtroom, before the safety, before the light. The memory came not like a dream, but like an old wound reopening, silent, sharp, and deep. It had been a night without stars, the kind of night where even the moon hides. Rain hammered against the window panes of a small, decaying house at the edge of town. The air inside was stale and cold, thick with the smell of mold and spilled liquor. The door to one room, the smallest in the house, was locked from the outside. Behind it sat a little girl. Her knees were pulled tight to her chest, her hair tangled and damp from tears. The walls were cracked, a single dim bulb flickering above her. She didn't cry anymore. She had run out of tears days ago, or weeks. Time didn't mean much in that room. She just listened to the sounds beyond the door, to the shouting, the breaking of glass, the heavy footsteps that used to come closer. But tonight, there was something different. A new sound. A deep bark, sharp, commanding, powerful. Then another, closer this time. The girl lifted her head, blinking through the dimness. The footsteps outside multiplied, heavier, faster. Voices shouted orders, and then, crash! The door burst open, splinters of wood flying across the floor. Flashlights cut through the dark. A uniformed man stepped in first, gun raised. "Clear!" he shouted. And behind him came another, a K9 handler, his vest soaked through with rain, and beside him, the dog. Rex. He moved like a shadow given purpose, fur slick with rain, eyes burning through the gloom. His nose twitched once, twice, and then he stopped, staring straight at the corner where the little girl sat. The officers' voices were a blur. "Check the rest of the house. We've got her. She's alive." But she didn't move, didn't speak. She just stared back at the animal standing in the doorway. Rex tilted his head slightly, his ears flicking forward. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped into the room. His paws made almost no sound on the cracked linoleum. He stopped a few feet away, lowered his head, and sniffed the air. The girl flinched when he got close, her body recoiling on instinct. The man behind him, Officer Daniels, knelt down, keeping his voice soft. "Hey, it's okay, sweetheart," he said. "He's here to help you. You're safe now." But it wasn't the man she listened to. It was the dog. Rex sat down, just like that. No rush, no sudden moves. He simply sat and waited, his eyes calm and steady, his tail brushing once against the floor. The girl stared. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the patter of rain on the roof. Then, cautiously, she stretched out one small hand. It shook as it reached forward. Rex didn't move until her fingers touched his fur. Warm. Real, alive. And in that instant, something inside her cracked. The walls she had built around her fear, her silence, her tiny world of hiding. A single sound escaped her lips, dry and broken but clear. "Doggy. Safe." Daniels froze. He looked at her, then at Rex. "What did she say?" The little girl repeated it, her voice barely a whisper. "Doggy safe." Rex's tail thumped once. Just once. Daniels swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, sweetheart. Doggy safe." Rex lay down beside her, curling close but not touching, his eyes always on her face. When officers brought blankets and food, he didn't leave. Time for Uncle Mohammedsum. When they took her outside to the ambulance, he followed. And later, when the doctor tried to examine her and she panicked, it was Rex who calmed her, sitting by her side, unblinking, steady as stone. He refused food, refused rest. Hours passed. The sun came and went. Still he stayed. At one point, a nurse whispered to Daniels, "He hasn't moved in hours. You should take him out." Daniels shook his head. "Try telling him that." And when they tried to lift him, Rex simply lay back down beside the girl, his chin resting near her hand. She had fallen asleep finally, the first deep sleep she'd had in months, her fingers tangled in his fur. By the time morning light poured through the hospital window, the bond was sealed. It wasn't just trust. It was something sacred, unspoken, absolute. Back in the present, the memory faded as softly as it came. Lily blinked, her tears drying slowly on her cheeks. Her hand still rested on Rex's back, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The judge stood near them, still silent, still watching. The story, which he had read about in brief police reports months ago, now came alive before his eyes. He saw the truth in it. The way she clung to the dog, the way he never took his eyes off her. It wasn't coincidence. It wasn't chance. It was survival. He turned to Daniels. "That rescue report," he murmured. "It said she didn't speak for months after, until the dog came." Daniels nodded, eyes damp. "She hadn't said a word, not to anyone. Then she said those two, doggy safe. After that, she wouldn't sleep unless he was near." The judge swallowed hard, his gaze falling on the girl and the shepherd once more. "Then it's true," he said quietly. "She wouldn't have survived without him." Daniels's voice was soft. "Sometimes it's not the law that saves people, Your Honor. Sometimes it's love." Lily leaned closer, pressing her forehead against Rex's collar. She wasn't thinking about the trial anymore, or the cameras, or the whispers that would fill tomorrow's papers. She was thinking of that first night, the warmth, the trust, the eyes that promised her safety when no one else could. She closed her eyes and whispered again, barely audible, a word she hadn't said in months. "Safe." Rex's ear twitched. His tail brushed against the floor. The judge's vision blurred for a moment. He turned away, pretending to fix his robe, but his voice came low and thick with emotion. "Court is adjourned," he said, "for all the right reasons." No gavel, no order, just quiet understanding. The sound of a little girl's heartbeat beside her dog, steady, calm, alive. Night settled over the precinct like a heavy blanket, the kind of stillness that only comes after chaos. The building hummed softly with fluorescent light, the faint crackle of radios, and the slow tick of a wall clock that no one had wound in years. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick with reflections, blue and red from the patrol cars idling in the lot, their sirens off but lights still blinking lazily, like the heartbeat of a tired city. In a quiet corner of the K9 unit room, Rex lay stretched across a worn blanket. His body bore the evidence of battle. A fresh bandage wrapped around one leg, a bruise beneath his fur, a small cut near his ear. Yet even injured, he looked powerful. His breathing was steady, deep, the kind of sound that filled the silence rather than broke it. The nameplate on the kennel beside him read, "Rex, Unit 47. But tonight, the officers had draped something new across it, a sheet of paper colored in crayon. The shaky handwriting of a child read, "Rex the Hero." The letters were uneven, drawn with the care only a child could give. In the picture, a big brown dog stood tall in front of a courthouse, a small girl beside him, her hand on his paw. Above them, a smiling sun wore a police cap. Lily had dropped it off that afternoon. She'd come with her social worker, clutching the paper in both hands like it was treasure. When she saw him sleeping, she didn't speak, just knelt, slid the drawing next to his blanket, and whispered, "Good boy." Then she left. Rex hadn't opened his eyes, but Daniel swore he'd seen the dog's tail move, just once, slow and tired, as if to say, "I know." Now, hours later, the precinct was almost empty. A few officers remained, the ones who couldn't bring themselves to go home yet. They drifted in and out of the K9 room, quiet as ghosts, each leaving something behind. Sergeant Cole placed a half-eaten sandwich near his bowl. "He earned the steak dinner, but this'll have to do till morning," he muttered. Officer Ray hung his service medal on the side of Rex's crate. "For bravery," he said, voice rough. "You deserve it more than I ever did." Another officer, young and wide-eyed, crouched beside him and whispered, "Thank you, buddy. My little girl. She saw what you did on the news. She cried." Then he reached out, brushing a hand through Rex's fur before standing and leaving quietly. Word of Rex's heroism had spread faster than wildfire. Every local station replayed the footage, the lunging suspect, the blur of movement, the bark that echoed like thunder. Headlines filled every screen. The dog that saved justice. Heroic K9 stops courthouse attack. Loyalty in action. Police dog prevents tragedy. But in the small K9 room, there were no flashing lights, no microphones, no applause. Just the rhythmic click of the clock and the sound of a dog sleeping. A soldier at rest. Officer Daniels sat on a metal chair near the wall, elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on the dog at his feet. He looked older tonight, the lines around his eyes deeper, the gray in his beard catching the dim light. His uniform jacket hung on a hook beside him. His white shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing arms scarred and strong from years of service. In front of him, on the table, lay the official report. Incident at the courthouse, November 14th. He'd written the first draft himself, but every time he read it, it felt wrong. Too clean, too procedural. It said what happened, but not what mattered. It didn't say how fast Rex had moved. It didn't say how close the judge came to death. It didn't say how a little girl's voice broke the silence of an entire courtroom. Daniels sighed and leaned back. "You did it again, partner," he murmured. "You made us all look slow." Rex's ear twitched at the sound of his voice. He didn't lift his head, but his tail brushed the floor once. The faintest acknowledgement. Daniel smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know. You're tired. You've earned it." He looked down, voice softening. "You scared the hell out of me, you know that? When you went down after the struggle, I thought I lost you." He paused, exhaling through his nose, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. "They don't tell you that part in training, how much losing one of you feels like losing a piece of yourself." The dog stirred slightly, opening one amber eye. Daniels chuckled under his breath. "Don't give me that look. I'm allowed to get sentimental once in a while." He reached down, his fingers brushing gently along the shepherd's head. "You're famous now, pal. The mayor called earlier. Wants to give you some medal. Said they're planning a ceremony." Rex blinked slowly, unimpressed. Daniels laughed quietly. "Yeah, figured you'd say that. You don't care about medals, huh? Just the work, always the work." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again. His eyes grew distant. "You know, They said this might have been your last case. You're getting old, they say. 8 years on the force. Most K9s retire by now, but not you. You wouldn't stop if they begged you. The room fell quiet again. Only the rain starting up outside filled the silence, tapping against the high window. Daniels's gaze softened. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this job when you're gone, Rex. He swallowed, his voice trembling slightly. But I do know one thing. Whatever time you've got left, we're gonna make it count. Rex's eyes closed again. The rise and fall of his chest was slow, steady. Daniels reached for the folded drawing by his paws, Lily's crayon masterpiece, and smiled. He lifted it slightly, studying the crooked sun and uneven lines. She got your good side, he whispered. Then he pinned it carefully to the bulletin board above Rex's bed, right beside the department's commendation photos, bright colors on a wall of black and white, a reminder that not all heroes wear a uniform. Some wear fur. An hour passed. One by one, the lights in the precinct flicked off. The hum of machines faded until only the soft whir of the night lamp remained. Daniels stayed. He couldn't leave yet. He sat in the dim glow, the city's reflection casting faint streaks of blue and red across the floor. Rex shifted slightly in his sleep, one paw twitching, maybe chasing something in a dream. Daniels smiled, the kind of smile that carries pride and heartbreak in equal measure. Sleep easy, partner, he whispered. You've done enough for a lifetime. Outside, the last patrol car pulled away, its headlights washing briefly over the glass before disappearing into the night. Inside, the hero of the courthouse slept, surrounded by medals, treats, and love, unaware that his story had already begun to echo far beyond those walls. And taped to the crate, fluttering softly in the breeze from the air vent, was the drawing of a child's hand. Rex the hero. The words glowed faintly under the lamp. A promise. A thank you. A legend in the making. The precinct had gone quiet hours ago. The hum of conversation, the ringing phones, even the creak of doors had faded into stillness. The only light that remained came from the small K9 unit office, where a single lamp glowed dimly through the glass window. Officer Daniels sat at his desk, sleeves rolled up, his coffee long gone cold. His badge lay on the table beside a half-finished report, the official documentation of the courthouse attack. But his eyes weren't on the words. They were on the figure resting a few feet away. Rex slept soundly on a folded blanket, his breathing soft, steady, rhythmic. The crayon drawing, Rex the hero, was still pinned on the wall behind him, fluttering faintly in the current of the air vent. It had become more than a drawing now. It was a symbol of everything that mattered, but could never fit neatly into a police report. Daniels rubbed his temples and leaned back. The day had been long. Interview after interview, paperwork upon paperwork, news calls that wouldn't stop. Yet beneath the exhaustion was something else. The ache of knowing this moment wouldn't last forever. A soft knock came at the door. Daniels looked up and, "It's open." The door creaked slightly, and Judge Hamilton stepped in. Gone was the robe and gavel. Tonight he was just a man, shoulders slumped, face tired, coat collar turned up against the cold. He carried 2 paper cups of coffee and handed one to Daniels without a word. Daniels accepted it with a faint smile. "Didn't think I'd see you here this late, Judge." Hamilton nodded toward the sleeping dog. "Couldn't sleep," he said quietly. "Figured I owed someone a visit." They both looked toward Rex, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm, the faint twitch of a paw hinting at dreams only he could see. The silence between the two men was heavy but comforting, like an old song played softly in the background. Hamilton took a slow sip of his coffee. "You know," he said after a long moment, "I've been in that courtroom for nearly 25 years. Thought I'd seen everything humanity could show me. The good, the evil, and the in-between." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "But that dog." He shook his head. "He reminded me that justice isn't just laws and words. Sometimes it's instinct. It's heart." Daniel smiled faintly, looking down at his hands. "He's got both, sir. More than most people I've met." The judge studied Daniels for a moment, his expression softening. "You've been partners for how long?" 8 years, Daniels replied quietly. 8 good years. That's a long time for a K9, isn't it? Daniels hesitated, his smile fading. He set the coffee down, fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "Yeah," he murmured. "It is." The room went still again. The weight of what wasn't said hung between them like fog. Hamilton leaned forward slightly. "You mean to tell me they're retiring him?" Daniels exhaled, nodding once. "That was the plan. The department's been hinting at it, for months. Said he's aging out, reflexes slowing, hearing not as sharp. They've got younger dogs coming in." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Paperwork already filed. Mandatory retirement by the end of the quarter." The judge frowned deeply. "And after that?" Daniels hesitated before answering. "He'd go to the training compound. Quiet life. Maybe a foster home if we're lucky. Some don't adjust well." His jaw tightened. "He's a working dog. He doesn't understand what it means to stop." The judge set his coffee aside. "You're not okay with it?" Daniels shook his head. "No, sir. I'm not. He saved more lives than half the precinct combined. You saw what he did in that courtroom. He's still got it. Maybe not forever, but long enough to matter." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They say it's policy, but policy doesn't know loyalty like he does." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the heater and the faint rustle of Rex's breathing. Finally, the judge stood, walking toward the sleeping dog. He knelt, awkwardly, with the care of a man who hadn't kneeled in years, and rested a hand gently on Rex's side. The dog stirred but didn't wake. "He doesn't belong in a kennel," Hamilton said softly. "Not after what he's done. Not after what he's given." Daniels watched, his throat tightening. Hamilton looked back over his shoulder. "He deserves to be honored. Properly. Not just a line in a file. A ceremony. Public. The city should see what courage looks like. Not in a strong courtroom. Not in a badge. But right here." He gestured toward Rex. "In fur and heart." Daniels swallowed hard, nodding slowly. He wouldn't know what to do with a crowd. The judge smiled. "Then it's not for him. It's for everyone else. For the people who need to remember that heroes still exist." The judge gave a final glance toward Rex and left, the door clicking softly behind him. Daniels stayed. He sat there in the dim light, the coffee now cold, the room still smelling faintly of rain and leather. Outside, the city was asleep. Inside, time seemed to stop. Rex shifted in his sleep, his paw twitching again. Daniels leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his eyes heavy with pride and sorrow. He reached down, brushing a hand across the shepherd's head, his voice a whisper meant for no one but the dog. "You've done enough, partner," he said softly. "You've done more than any of us ever could." Rex's tail gave a faint thump against the floor, once, twice, as if answering. Daniel smiled, tears glinting in his eyes. "Yeah," he murmured. "I know. You're still not done yet, are you?" He looked up at the wall where Lily's crayon drawing hung. Bright colors, crooked lines, words that made everything worth it. He whispered again, barely audible. "Yeah, you always were." The morning sun broke through the clouds like a promise kept. Its warm light spread across the courthouse lawn, touching everything with a soft golden glow. The steps, the flag fluttering in the wind, the rows of white chairs that had been set up facing a small stage draped in blue and gold. It wasn't an ordinary day for the town. Reporters lined the edges of the crowd, cameras poised but unusually quiet. Uniformed officers stood in neat rows, their badges gleaming. Families filled the seats, mothers holding small children, elderly veterans standing at attention, townsfolk who had come not because they were invited, but because they needed to be there. At the center of it all sat Rex. The great German shepherd rested on a thick blanket near the stage, his coat brushed to a shine, his eyes calm and alert. His handler, Officer Daniels, stood just behind him, dressed in full formal blues, hat tucked under his arm. When Daniels had arrived that morning, the first thing he noticed was the sound, not the murmurs of the crowd, but the faint rustle of flags in the wind, the kind of sound that carried reverence. It reminded him of the quiet moments before a service, the kind where everyone feels something sacred, but no one dares speak it aloud. Judge Hamilton stood on the podium, a microphone waiting before him. The man who had once presided over cases of guilt and innocence now faced something much simpler: gratitude. He cleared his throat, glancing at the rows of people, then down at the shepherd at his feet. "We gather here today," he began, his voice steady but soft, "not just to honor a police dog, but to recognize the courage, loyalty, and heart that reminded us all what justice truly means." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others pressed tissues to their eyes. Hamilton continued. "In a world that often forgets what selflessness looks like," Rex showed us. He stood between danger and the innocent. He saw what we could not, and he acted without hesitation, without fear, and without a single thought for himself. He paused, glancing toward Daniels. The officer's eyes were fixed on his partner, his jaw tight, pride and sadness blending into something wordless. Hamilton smiled faintly. "I have sat in that courtroom for 25 years. I have seen heroes in uniforms, in suits, even in shackles. But that day I saw one on 4 legs." The crowd applauded gently, not the loud, boisterous kind, but the soft, reverent kind that feels like prayer. When she finished, the crowd began to clap again, louder this time. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You saved me again." Rex's tail gave a faint, dignified wag. Then, slowly, almost deliberately, he lowered his head, a gesture so graceful, so human, that it drew a collective gasp from the crowd. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a command. It was a salute. The applause swelled. People rose to their feet. Some cried openly now, officers, parents, strangers alike. Even the judge's voice broke as he clapped, whispering under his breath, "God bless that dog." Reporters captured the scene, but no one spoke above the moment. The sound of hands meeting hands filled the air like rain on rooftops. Steady, endless, cleansing. Daniels looked down at his partner, his heart aching with pride. "That's my boy," he murmured. Rex turned his head slightly, meeting his handler's eyes. There was something there, a kind of knowing, deep and eternal, as if he understood everything that was said and everything that wasn't. For a moment, time seemed to stretch. The sun hung above them, the flags rippled, the crowd's cheers softened to a hum. Lily reached out, placing her small hand against Rex's chest, feeling the thump of his heartbeat. "Can I stay a little longer?" she asked Daniels quietly. Daniels crouched beside her. "He'd like that," he said. "He likes you, you know." She giggled softly. "I know." Rex leaned forward, his nose brushing her hand. She smiled through her tears. "See?" Daniels said gently. "Told you he does." Judge Hamilton stepped forward once more. "Let it be known," he declared, voice firm but full of warmth, "that on this day, our city honors Officer Rex for valor, loyalty, and the unspoken courage that reminds us all of the good we still have left." He glanced down, his expression softening. "And to the little girl who trusted him when she couldn't trust anyone else, may you both always find your way back to each other." Lily's eyes shimmered. She looked up at him, then down at Rex, and whispered, "I will." As the ceremony drew to a close, the band struck up a low, solemn melody, a police hymn, slow and proud. Officers saluted, the flag dipped, and in the golden light of that late morning, the image of the German shepherd standing proudly with a medal around his neck became something eternal. Rex didn't bark, didn't move. He simply stood there, the weight of the ribbon resting against his fur, the reflection of the flag dancing in his eyes. Daniels reached out and laid a hand on his back. The shepherd turned his head slightly, just enough for their eyes to meet. The officer's voice was low but steady. "You did it, partner. The whole city knows now." The little girl leaned in close again, her whisper carried away by the breeze. "You saved me again." And in that quiet, sacred moment, as the sun rose higher and applause rolled across the courtyard like thunder, Rex lifted his head toward the sound, proud, unbroken, and forever a hero. The city had changed. The courthouse was newer now, its stone walls cleaned, its steps repaired, its flagpole taller than before. But on the far corner of the courtyard, beneath the old oak tree that had stood through decades of trials and verdicts, something else now stood. A statue. It was life-sized, bronze and dignified, capturing the image of a German shepherd sitting proudly, head raised, eyes carved with that same calm vigilance he'd been known for in life. On the base, engraved in shining letters, were the words, "Rex, the dog that saved justice." Below that, smaller, simpler words, "Loyalty lives forever." Her hand rested on the engraved letters, "Rex." She traced each one slowly, her throat tightening. "You taught me what loyalty means," she said softly. "You showed me what love without words looks like." The memories returned in flashes, the bark that shattered a courtroom silence, the warmth of fur against her tears, the sound of his breathing as she fell asleep in the hospital years ago. Every piece of her courage, every step she took toward healing, had his paw prints beneath it. For years after his passing, she had visited the precinct, talking to Officer Daniels, sitting beside Rex's old kennel. They had laughed and cried over the stories, the rescues, the training mishaps, the stubbornness that made Rex both a legend and a handful. When he'd finally passed, peacefully one winter night, time from 100 moms, the whole town had mourned. Officers stood shoulder to shoulder in silence. The judge himself had carried the medal to his resting place. And Lily, then just a teenager, had promised him something quietly, through tears and trembling lips. "I'll make you proud, Rex. I'll keep people safe, the way you did for me." And she had kept that promise. Years of academy training, long nights, countless patrols, each challenge faced with the same calm bravery she'd learned by watching him. And now, standing before his statue, she felt that same quiet strength again. Not behind her this time, but within her. Shadow nudged her leg, letting out a small huff. She looked down and smiled. "You'd like him," she said. "He's got your eyes. Same stubborn streak, too." The young dog tilted his head, as if understanding. She knelt, running a hand along his neck. "You've got big shoes to fill, buddy," she whispered. "But don't worry. I had the best teacher there ever was." She stood again, looking up at the statue. The sunlight had climbed higher now, wrapping both the bronze figure and her in golden light. A soft breeze carried the sound of flags flapping above the courthouse, and somewhere in the distance, a bell chimed the hour. Lily took a deep breath, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "You saved me, Rex," she said. "Not just that day, every day after. You taught me that courage doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you protect others anyway. You showed me that real love doesn't need words. It just needs presence." Her eyes shimmered. "Time some fiends hard roman. I hope you know, you never really left. You're still here. Every time I put on this badge, every time I walk into a courtroom, every time I meet a kid who's scared the way I once was." She paused, wiping a tear that caught on her cheek. "You saved me again, even now." She stepped closer, laying her palm gently on the statue's paw, the same way she used to hold his. For a moment, everything went still. The wind calmed, the world hushed. It felt impossibly like he was there, not in body but in spirit, watching, guarding, still her silent guardian, even after all these years. Her voice came in a whisper, like a vow to the wind. "Rest easy, partner. I've got it from here." Shadow sat beside her, tail brushing the ground, head tilted toward the statue, as if he too understood the weight of the moment. Together, they stood there, woman and dog, past and present, legacy and continuation, bound by the same unspoken thread of loyalty that time could never break. As the camera would fade in that imagined film, the scene would linger, her hand on the bronze paw, her reflection mirrored faintly in the polished metal. The sunrise behind her painted the sky in hues of gold and rose, stretching across the horizon like a quiet benediction. A voiceover, her older self, echoed softly over the fading light. "He taught me what loyalty means. He showed me what love without words looks like. And even when the world moves on, his spirit walks beside me. In every act of courage, in every heartbeat of faith." The music swells gently, not loud, not grand, but tender. As the camera pans upward, the statue glows under the rising sun, and in its shadow stand the woman and her new partner, guardians of the same legacy. The final frame holds still, a bronze paw, a human hand, and light spilling across both, infinite, eternal. Sometimes, stories like Rex's remind us that love doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it walks beside us on four legs, asking for nothing but trust. German Shepherds, especially, have that quiet, steadfast way of showing devotion, not through tricks or training, but through presence, loyalty, and a kind of understanding that reaches straight to the heart. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt that bond, that unspoken promise, then you already know what this story is really about. It's about love that protects, heals, and lasts far longer than we expect. And if you ever feel inspired to understand your own dog a little better, to build that same kind of connection, there's a wonderful resource I came across recently that might help you do just that. No pressure at all. It's simply something I thought you'd enjoy exploring. Because in the end, our dogs give us their whole hearts. It's up to us to listen, learn, and love them back with everything we have.